Hello and welcome to the Grow Talks panel discussion series jointly organized by the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany in Singapore together with the Singapore Embassy in Berlin, coming together on the occasion of 60 years of bilateral diplomatic relations between Germany and Singapore. I'm Augustine Athwan, your moderator for this panel series. Today we kick off the final episode of our four-part special, and the topic for the panel discussion, New Ways to Success. Our experts will examine how both Singapore and Germany can collaborate to ensure their workforces remain adaptable in the face of evolving industry trends and new technologies. How can education, training, and lifelong learning become pillars of success for these nations' futures? So this is where we'd like to involve you, members of the audience. Please do take a moment to reflect on what are your pressing questions. What would you like to pose to the panel? Do challenge our panel, as together over the next hour we hope to ignite serious discussion on a range of issues. Meanwhile, let me introduce our panel members for today. Joining me, Professor Dr. Thomas Schroeder, UNESCO Chair of TVET and Competence Development for the Future of Work, Technical University of Dortmund. Alexander Melkers, General Manager and Managing Director of Melkers Group. Loh Yew Cheong, Deputy Principal for the Academic at Singapore Polytechnic. And Tan Jiek Min, Director, National Centre of Excellence for Workplace Learning at Nanyang Polytechnic. Thank you all for being here and welcome to the Grow Talks, gentlemen. Let's cut to the chase. We've labeled the opening segment Building on the Present, and I want to involve all four speakers. Feel free to interpret the question any way you feel best, but 2 minutes, gentlemen. What are these new ways or new paths to success that are being promoted in Germany and Singapore? Let's start with Yew Cheong. You have the floor.
Okay, I think in Singapore, if we look at the traditional pathways that the students take, they go from secondary schools and they went on to junior college, before proceeding to the autonomous universities. So this is sort of the pathway that I went through, right? But I think more and more students are actually taking the polytechnic pathway, where they come through the polytechnic education, doing a 3-year diploma course, and from there they proceed on to the university or to the workplace to pursue their career. And in Singapore Polytechnic, we see about 55% of our students in Singapore Polytechnic going directly onto the autonomous university for their degree program. So this is a very viable pathway for many Singapore students currently. In fact, we have about, as a national cohort, I think more than 60% of our students actually go through the polytechnic education. And of course, we do have students who doesn't come directly to the polytechnic, but went through the Institute of Technical Education. So these are students who might not have performed that well in the secondary schools, but eventually they're able to enroll through the polytechnic and still go on to the university. So we have many different pathways in Singapore for success.
And the interesting point that you raise is no matter which path they take, they don't just stop there, they go on to take further studies.
That's right.
We'll bring Thomas into the situation. What's the picture like in Germany, Thomas?
Well, I think not only in Germany, globally, what we experience are disruptive technologies or trends like we've discussed these days, like greening. We have digitalization, AI kicking in and changing the floor and the landscape and the ecosystems. And there are a lot more opportunities now than there were only very few years ago. So that's quite unique to experience this in a lifetime. And what I assume we will experience is that this will open up additional chances for initial TVET and lifelong learning or continuous TVET. And it will enhance one or maybe all learning venues, which traditionally in Germany at least is a vocational school, it's a training center for skills development, and the in-company workplace. But I think in looking at those 3 different learning venues, the in-company workplace learning, as we discussed these days, will have gain new opportunities and will be strengthened. And we are here at the beginning of a very interesting process.
I read very interesting stories about technical and vocational education and training, TVET, in the German context, and so we'll delve into this deeper. Let's bring our next speaker, Jack Min, into the conversation. How are things evolving again?
Thanks. I think in the past, the definition of success can be very narrow. You're looking at more like academic success, academic pathways. I think in today's context, we are trying to go beyond that. I mean, we are not preparing students just for employment alone, but typically we can help them to become entrepreneurs, startups and so on. And I think the definition has to be broader in that sense, just going beyond the academic success and preparing people for employment. And I also like to add that even in terms of success, it is not linear. I mean, you may not be successful during your school time, but you can always come back later on through what we call continuing education and training. And subsequently, you could pick up new skills, new knowledge along the way, and actually propel yourself to success further down the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Dermot, for that broad overview. Bring Alexander into the conversation. Your thoughts on this?
Thank you. I'm an employer in Singapore. I employ staff here, and but in another role, I'm also the vice president of the Singapore National Employer Federation. And together we negotiate and work with our unions and the government to create a stable workforce. And the outcome, of course, we desire is rising wages. We want to make sure that salaries increase continuously, and that's where education comes in absolutely critically. Everybody knows from a macroeconomic point of view that in order to raise salaries, you need to raise productivity. You cannot have long-term salary increases without long-term productivity gains. And we recognize very much that to improve productivity, you really need to have a very skillful workforce. So that's a bit the framework where we come in as employers, why the topic of skills is so relevant and why it has become so much more relevant to make sure that the education system produces the relevant skills that are now needed and also in the future needed in Singapore. Singapore is very well structured because we have a highly collaborative and trusted collaboration between the unions representing the workers, the government and the employers. That is a unique and strength that we have here, and later on we can explore a little bit more how that has actually helped to create an educational platform, an ecosystem that is allowing Singapore maybe to make significant progress. But we have also a lot of challenges on that road when it comes to vocational and skill training.
Yes, and we will definitely delve into that. But thank you, Alexander, for raising the importance of having different voices at the table, employers, the education sector, the workers, and of course the state as well. Thomas, let's move this along. When we talk about technical and vocational education and training, which we refer to as TVET, give us a snapshot of how this is being designed now in Germany versus the past and delivered in Germany.
Thanks very much for this very demanding question, actually. I try my best. Well, the core, maybe, Germany is renowned for its dual system, and our colleague already described who's working and cooperating together in order to develop the system, and which, of course, contributes as well to societal acknowledgement, which is necessary. Because as parents, you need to decide where to send your children or what you want them to do, and what you want them, which career pathway you allow them to do. So that's one core element. But around this dual system, there are other programs. The idea behind these programs is to allow for career pathways different into academia, maybe, or into continuous vocational education, maybe. So let's say maybe half of a cohort every year enters a dual system and enters a mostly 3-year program, not always, but mostly 3-year program. So you earn already a little salary, social security will be paid. It's not overwhelming, but it's a beginning. And the idea from a perspective of a company is they get to know the person who is working with them for 3 years. So after the apprenticeship, We don't need an additional trainee program. We don't need a recruitment process. That was before already. And the companies are not obliged to take him over or her over into a permanent position.
But just to clarify, so you're saying in Germany right now, when the students come in, they get salary, and the companies, how do they manage that? Do they get some sort of incentives to run this entire 3-year program?
Well, it depends on the sector. So there are varieties between different sectors and even varieties between the regions. We have in Germany maybe 50,000 positions which where companies couldn't find an apprentice. And so that depends on sectors and on regions. There are differences. But of course, if companies pay a salary, that's of course tax deductible. And on the other hand, if this is done in a clever manner, if a workplace is really strengthened as a learning venue, of course, the learning venue workplace can offer something all the other learning venues cannot offer. It's real work. And so you learn something there which you cannot learn somewhere else, and you're productive already. So it's not only basically about the company you're paying something, they benefit as well from this kind of productive education.
Are you seeing that? And I mean, we have two experts here from two polytechnics. Jigmin, are they doing this on the ground? Companies taking in students from get-go?
Our history is very different from Germany. Germany has a very strong tradition going back to hundreds of years ago through their guilds and so on. We are trying to learn the best things from them as well. So the government is encouraging a lot of the companies to actually put in place this sort of structured training, putting a lot of incentives to help defray the cost. But at the same time, what we want to do is that the training has got to be planned, it's got to be deliberate, and it's got to be structured. We don't want to leave it to chance whereby the learning outcomes are very much left to each individual coach on the floor. And that will actually then diminish the value of the training and apprenticeship. And that's precisely what we are trying to hope that more companies will come on board in this manner.
What sectors are doing well in this? I mean, we have manufacturing and so many other sectors in the country.
We see it happening more at the frontline type of industries. So those at the back, those are more of the white-collar type. It's not as prevalent. But surprisingly, in Germany and Switzerland, we see this also in the white-collar sectors. But in Singapore, it's not so well entrenched yet for the white-collar. Blue-collar, yes.
All right. Alexander?
I myself, I have Abitur, which is the equivalent of A-level or IB. So with my Abitur, I can access university. But I decided to go for a 2-year vocational training program in what is called international trade. And I did that before university because for me, the way I grew up, I thought it was very important to have a relevant skill. And that allows me then to go to university and then be very job ready when I leave university. And that's, of course, is an important thing. So it's not an either or, but it's also complementing a career. What is the big difference, of course, in Germany? You mentioned it, but I think it's important to crystallize it. We have the history of the trade associations, the guilds. But our apprenticeship program in Germany, the curriculum, the content typically is driven by the respective industry. And it's not typically government-driven or government-led. So you don't have the Ministry of Education who tries to contract the companies to provide training, but you have actually companies, trade associations, who come together in their associations, in their unions, to say we need to build an ecosystem, and who then contract schools to provide the respective training. In simplistic terms, of course, there are many nuances, but it's really a different approach to it. Singapore has to do it the way we are doing it here right now because we do not have strong trade associations. And culturally, it's very important to be aware about that. Cooperation amongst competitors, competing companies, doesn't come naturally in this culture, to say it a little bit diplomatically.
I mean, every company wants to take care of itself, right?
The view is, what happens if I train and the trainee leaves my company and works for somebody else?
To next door, yes.
To the next girl. And this, of course, happens in also in Germany. But in Germany, you have a whole ecosystem. So you train 2 people because you're obliged to train. And then these 2 people leave your company, but maybe 2 others join your company. And therefore, you are actually participating in the ecosystem. It is kind of almost mandatory if you are operating in certain industries.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, I'm really going to push all of you on this. And I'll come back to Thomas. So how do German companies do this? Yes, tax incentives, 3 years, train them, and then what if they choose not to come back? Is that just a contribution to the country, and as part of the risk that you take? Would like to hear your thoughts, Thomas. But Yu Chong, why is it not possible to get companies in Singapore to emulate what's happening in Germany? I mean, it is, after all, a pressing challenge. And you specifically, you raised an important point in the preliminary research about the need for personal persistence. I mean, Alexander himself took 2 years to take a program. That's personal persistence. Proactive career management is I have to manage and take care of myself at the end. State can do so much. Educational institutions can do so much. But the interesting thing about today's conversation is things are changing so fast. How is your polytechnic managing that?
Yeah. So I think for Singapore Polytechnic, we address the needs of individuals at different level. I think Chapman just mentioned about their lifelong learning pathways, where the working adults needs to sort of pick up new skills for transition to a different career. So we do provide courses like the career transition programs in different areas like digitalization, HR, AI, and things like that to help individuals transit from one career to another career. So that's one needs that we see in the industry. And of course, for the fresh graduates, we have the employment support center that we have just set up to help the graduating students as well as alumni to be able to be mentored to actually have a good start sort of in a career that they desire, and maybe help them to make the connections to the different industry partners, for such a career start. And of course, for the company level, we do have a program called Company and Workforce Transformation, where we leverage our partnership with the different companies to actually establish a sort of guiding the companies to see the strategic directions and the technology areas that they need to develop, as well as training the manpower within the company.
But this is voluntary.
And this is up to the company,
Up
right?
to the company.
Up to the company. If they see a need for them to transform their company sort of technology or business or even their HR or the manpower, so they can come on such a program that we can help them to take this journey together.
But do you also use that opportunity to introduce your students into certain sort of apprenticeship programs?
That's right. Yeah. So as part of this training, we will know what project they want to embark, and we actually bring the students into some of this project as part of the training for
So
them.
it's literally a one-stop matchmaking sort of
In a way,
setup.
yes.
Yeah, Jackman, I see you taking the mic. Please,
Right.
gentlemen, feel free to jump in anytime. But I do have a specific question for you. Work-based learning at the company level, not new. It's been done all over the world. It involves the apprenticeship with the salary and the tax incentives, as Thomas alluded to earlier. But are we witnessing a low take-up rate? I mean, can you give us some facts on this?
Thank you. Before I do that, I just want to add a little bit of what Alexander mentioned as well.
Sure,
He
sure.
shared the perspective in terms of Germany, how the trade chambers and associations are actually taking an active role in determining the curriculum. Singapore, we unfortunately don't have that history. So what the government is trying to do is to intervene and accelerate the process. So the government intervenes by calling some of the major players or the industry bodies to actually come on board. Then we set the skills framework for certain key industries.
Your word intervene is very soft, but it sounds more like, okay, all of you are coming for this meeting tomorrow.
The key thing is to intervene to accelerate the process rather than leave it for a couple of 100 years in order to make it happen.
Sure.
I think that's the key message we are trying to do here in Singapore. As to your question in terms of the take-up
Work-based
rate
learning,
and so on, I think there are difficulties in implementing on the ground due to a couple of factors. I think the first one is stakeholder expectations. Typically, the trainee and the company may not see eye to eye in terms of the expectations. The trainee expects a lot more, the company expects this and so on. So we find that is a stumbling block in terms of how we actually do it. The second key one is a lot of the training happens to be unstructured, especially in SMEs. And when we say unstructured, I mean when we look for structure in companies for such training, I'm looking at the presence of whether you have some blueprints available, structured, where you have outcomes. And I also look at whether you have mentors and coaches to complete the entire ecosystem to ensure that nothing is left to chance. So those are things as well. And the last one is probably expectations in terms of from the mentees or the trainees to think whether this would really help them in their career or not. If that is not spelled out clearly to them, then they may feel that it's not of much use to me. I will probably go for a formal qualification program where I can get a qualification at the end. And I think that is something that's plaguing a lot of the issues that we've seen in industry.
Sure. So plan, determine, leading some clear outcomes. And in the end, the young people themselves also need to take ownership, right, to determine their pathways. Gentlemen, perfect timing. Let's move on to this segment that we have labeled Challenges to the Present Educational Practices. Thomas, you actually helped frame this. A lot of new ways to success in Germany and Singapore, but it depends a lot on funding from the state. Some argue throwing money at the problem is not going to solve the problem. Your thoughts on that?
No, of course not. But I think you have to look into specific situations. And when I hear people saying, like you just did in Germany, worked on the system many centuries, I would say, well, that wouldn't be an obstacle for me, and it's happened in the course of history. And I think from my personal perspective, what do we really need? We need a skilled labor force which is competitive and companies which are competitive and which can act in a globalized world. And so we need a labor force which has the competences that can deliver the quality which we need in order to export. As a nation, we highly depend on export. And we want, from a societal perspective, we want them to be good taxpayers. So we want them to earn a high salary because we get something in return. So it's not throwing money. It's about cleverly investing money. As a state, I have an interest in a high-skilled labor force. As a company, I have an interest in a high-skilled labor force. And me as an individual, I have an interest in earning decent money, which allows me to participate in society. What's really important in order to gain societal acceptance, because we can't possibly send everybody to university. We know we at the moment we have a labor shortcut, because too many, it's not imbalanced anymore as it was, let's say, 20 years ago in Germany. And so that's a problem we are facing in Germany. But societal acceptance for the system is important, and that means we need career pathways, we need opportunities for individual development and other positions, and a vocational career track. And the idea of that people are earning decent money, that you can afford a living. And there are some who go under A levels. Normally, people who do an A level. Me, I did the same thing. After the A level, I underwent a TVET program for different reasons, and so societal acceptance can only be achieved by involving many stakeholders. So we have a multi-stakeholder approach, and that works well. And unions and companies, they work together. If they sit together, this is a process moderated by the state. So the state is moderating and has a say as well in the process of shaping vocational profiles, standards, and this needs to be developed, adapted. New technologies need to be adapted. So that's a process where they really work together. This is called consensual principle. And only if they all agree, the paper is ready and the standard is ready. And then maybe 5 minutes later, they go into a different room and they fight hard because it's about money or salaries or whatever. Thank you.
I know. And it's good that you bring wages in panel, so don't lose sight of that. But the reason I brought this up is because in Singapore's context, there's an aging population. Total fertility rate, we know the numbers. And so the state is moving towards the higher end of the workforce and the kind of work that needs to be done. Hence, tax incentives and sort of subtle hint that's developed the force here. But taking this term societal acceptance, at the end of the day, it's up to the individuals, right? Even parents come in. Parents might say, no, I don't want my child to pursue this path. I want my child to pursue this path. And the previous panel raised a very interesting phase. We cannot, in the pursuit of high tech, lose sight of high touch. There's still the human element, the face-to-face interaction that is needed. And not all jobs can embrace AI and just continue that direction. So can I bring in Yu Cheong? You shared in your initial research points that there is a need to know how they can achieve this. So on the ground, you create the spaces, the sandboxes, the internship opportunities, but I sense from my own research there are still stumbling blocks and resistance on the ground. Your thoughts on that, Yu Cheong?
Yeah, I think the key thing is that the students actually sort of follow the aspiration of the parents quite a fair bit in Singapore. I think the parents sort of try to push the children to complete their university educations before they venture into a career. I think that is a very deep influence in our society, even though we try to create new pathways, like something like the apprenticeship type pathways. The parents are not very keen to actually encourage their child to go through this pathway. So that's one sort of societal mindset that we are fighting against. I think the other area, of course, we do see new spark of students wanting to take the entrepreneurship pathways, and we do see success in that as well. So in Singapore Polytechnic, we have one diploma, which is the diploma in engineering with business, which actually helps our students to connect business, with the technology considerations in starting up business. So we see quite a fair bit of a few graduates actually having a good startup company that actually they did not take the university pathway. They eventually founded their own companies and become successful.
But what sparked that? Was it an individual desire, or does the Polytechnic also create some sort of,
So we did provide a platform for them to understand how to start a business. At the Polytechnic level, we do have a spin-off sort of entrepreneur support where we get our alumni who are successful in business to mentor these students. But ultimately, it's still the innate desire from the student themselves that they want to venture into a different pathway. And we see actually those students who have this innate desire, actually they push themselves along. Even when they're serving NS, they still pursue the thoughts in these areas. So I think that is the type of new spark that we are seeing.
Yeah, so for those who may not be familiar watching us online, NS is the short form for National Service. In Singapore, we have a mandatory 2 years of military service where the young boys will have to do that. Both for Jack Min and for Alexander, feel free to jump in, but time is not on our side. We need to move on to solutions very soon. But staying on the challenges, is it possible for new ways to success for someone to come into your Polytechnic, Jack Min, take a technical course, but then say, I want to have an apprenticeship and the orchestra, in a dance troupe or something that's totally out of the main vocation that they're doing? And you're smiling. Does the Polytechnic? So, hang on, I think you better finish this. How do you manage? Because that's also an interpretation of new ways to success.
Correct. You're right. Absolutely. I think, but for for all the polytechnics, there's what we call a minimum entry requirements. There'll be some basic requirements for certain type of courses. For example, if you're going to engineering, we definitely require you to have certain strong foundation in mathematics. Not that we don't want you, but we are afraid that you cannot cope with the program subsequently later on. So these are things. But during your time with us, we try to align your interest to the areas that you're interested in, not necessarily by program, but by areas of interest. You could pivot to other areas as well. And then we also encourage them to take up other interests within the Polytechnic in CCAs, entrepreneurship, and so on. And just as Yu Cheong mentioned, there's a strong push to encourage our students to go beyond the normal comfort zone. Go into start up something, and we will provide some funding to co-share with you, to let you experiment, to try out different things along the way. If you're successful, very good. We'll be very happy that you can come back and then share it with our students in the future. So that's something that we do. But the other thing that all the polytechnics do now is that we don't only focus on what we call pre-employment training, those school leavers who actually come to the polytechnic, but we do a lot of what we call continuing education for adult learners. And this is where I think we play a big role. Because we want to make sure that the adult workers in the workforce continue to get upgraded. And in today's context, sometimes a person may be required to change job a couple of times, and sometimes in a totally different area. So we have a big role to make sure that if they want to go in a different area, we can equip them and support them with the knowledge and competencies to actually move into that new area, and with as much government help as possible.
But all that within the 3 years that they are with you, that's like 36 months.
Beyond that. It goes beyond that. So
that.
we are shifting the concept from what we call lifelong employment to lifelong employability. It means we want to make sure that you have the skills to keep you employed, even though it may be in a different career, different job, but you have the skills which industry needs.
Alexander, you have the final word in this round. Your thoughts?
Maybe it's already for the next topic.
Yes.
Partly relevant. I think this topic about mindset is absolutely critical. I think Singapore has taken basically an all-society approach to it by applying skills, future skills first, and to make sure that lifelong learning becomes part of a whole society effort. So we are not looking only at the people who are coming out of university or entering school, but at everybody. And we need to also address the mindset of the parents. I think it's important. And if you address the mindset of the parents, you also, for example, address the mindset of the people in the company. We talked briefly about it, that we don't have a in-the-company training culture. So if I employ a trainee or an intern and I put them in front of my Singaporean staff, they look at me and say, like, why would I waste time to train that person? That is a mindset. You know, it's not right or wrong, but that's the mindset that we're growing up. It was a very performance-driven economy and business, and you just have to mind your own business. You get along, you produce, you do something, and training somebody else is not intuitive as a part of a KPI. Where this vocational training comes in and is so amazing and offers so many opportunities is that you can attach appreciation and recognition even to simple jobs. I give you an example. I was part of a dinner event with a very high-profile Swiss politician, and we were Singaporean politicians with him. And at dinner, he was asked, "So what are your children doing?" And he said, "Oh, my daughter is a hairdresser." And there was this moment of dead silence in the room where the Singaporean ministers almost wanted to say, "I'm sorry." They didn't say it. But you had that awkwardness. Wow, she didn't make it more than a hairdresser. Where of course, he picked that up immediately and said, like, well, she went through the training of a hairdresser. She was a junior hairdresser, then she became, I don't know what is it in English, the middle one, and then you become a master hairdresser. And when you're a master hairdresser, you're actually allowed to operate your own hairdressing shop. You have to train other people. You learn accounting, chemical, and so on. So if you have a structured vocational training, you can create an appreciation even for jobs which in our society right now have little appreciation, and that is all the crafts. These are the plumbers, and this is a hairdresser, this is a baker, this is, whatever we have it, where people here just do the job, and where with vocational training in a structured way, you address a title, a diploma. It's not necessarily a diploma. So I think that there's so much upside potential in order to change that mindset and to get more appreciation.
No, but I'm so glad you brought this up. Sounds like maybe at least in the Singapore context, polytechnics should organize some weekend workshops for parents and bring the parents in and, throw in some free coffee and tea and have a session. But Thomas, just to quickly wrap up very briefly, we did discuss this coming into the conversation about the need for grades. Like even in a cameraman, you have a cameraman, you have a senior cameraman, you have a principal cameraman. So there's a need to have grades and qualifications, because at the end of the day, the public also has the right to know, is this person a skilled plumber? Does this person have the skills to do it, right? Your thoughts very briefly on that.
Yes, I would I would support what was just said. If we have grades, if we have additional profiles in continuous and vocational education, it goes beyond short courses. It would be more. It could be arranged in such a manner that it allows for additional tasks, for running an own company, for being more responsible, or for even having own apprentices. So this basically can be organized and should be organized, and it should offer alternative career pathways in the vocational track, alternatively to a regular university pathway. And I think that's something our society in Germany profits from, that it has both tracks, that both tracks can be very, very attractive for young people in terms of material benefit, in terms of salaries and earning money. I think our society is more and more going to the direction that it becomes, due to the labor shortcut, more attractive for young people, material with regard to the salary, more attractive for young people to enter into a vocational career pathway. That's what we are observing now.
All right. So at this point, a very quick question from the floor. Do we have one? Otherwise, I will move the conversation to... All right, so think about it. We have labeled the next section, we're actually making good time, groundbreaking, future-oriented strategies. And gentlemen, I'm going to put you all on the spot. We haven't discussed gender. So there's also a deliberate attempt in education and in lifelong learning to get the women into this career and new ways of success. I won't mention the name of the university, but one university in Singapore had a major campaign to try and educate the public and parents and women and girls that women are great inventors. I didn't know that a woman invented the windscreen wiper. A woman invented the Kevlar vest, the vest that the police use. And there are a whole series of stories that went out there to educate the public that women can also play a role and can continue to play a role. So keep that in the back of your mind. But I'm going to put you all in a spot here. We're looking for groundbreaking, future-oriented strategies. So we have used up our time talking about the challenges and the present situation. So let's focus on some of the themes that have come up in the Grow Talk series. AI came up, cybersecurity, green energy, green transition, green economies, and the need for more deep research and development. So the list goes on, but what would your strategic recommendations be, Yu Chong? And I'm going to bring Jack Min also into the conversation. What would that be?
I think for sure AI is going to be something that the entire industry, entire workforce will adopt, in the future. And therefore, the curriculum needs to evolve rapidly to include AI in training. But I think there's always this concern that AI makes a person stupid. When they depend too much on the AI and then they start to just take the AI output and just use it. So I think that is where the challenge is. And for education, I think it's very important to evolve how we use AI to make a person more intelligent. So for example, when we allow the students to use AI currently, we actually test them on explaining, evaluating. So the higher order learning outcomes are being introduced into the curriculum so that they can actually be trained in terms of the thinking. I think the critical thinking skills and the humanistic skills are becoming even more important in the era of AI.
Yeah, but I want to be cheeky here. Most people's perception is that, I'm going to study and take a course and then I just need to hold a tablet and I can solve the world's problems. But we still need people to go there and physically install the wind turbine. In fact, in residences now in Singapore, solar panels are being fitted on public housing. So there's a dilemma. There's not enough of people pursuing a new way to success that is the good old-fashioned using your hands and getting out there on the ground. Everybody thinks I can solve it with a tablet in my hand.
So that's why in the polytechnic education, we emphasize a lot on the practical training. Almost 40 to 50% of our training actually on practical training. So we actually have companies, like the German companies, co-locating their laboratories within the polytechnic itself. For example, we have Siemens on digital technologies. We have Bosch Bosch Restaurant on advanced manufacturing sort of equipment. So they are co-locating their training within Singapore Polytechnic, and we are exposing students to all the sort of practical hand skills in coming up with innovations using new technologies. So this training becomes very key as part of the Polytechnic education.
Jackman?
I think certainly the areas mentioned, areas like AI, sustainability, they are really upcoming areas, and they are becoming quite pervasive in all the sectors that we see. What we are trying to do is that I think for us, we are trying to look at it from an applied angle. We are not going to be focusing for the Polytechnic to develop large language models. Rather, we are looking at how we can use AI in specific sectors, how can it apply. So for example, I think even in Singapore's context, when we look at sustainability, for example, or so on, with green economies, we are strong in the financial center. We are looking at green financing, for example, rather than the green economy as a whole. And because we are a major aviation hub, we are looking at sustainable aviation fuel as well. So these are areas where I think we have inherent strengths, and we should tap it to our advantage and not to be a jack of all trades in those areas.
Okay, so there's a lot of awareness and there's a lot of knowledge at the high level, at the government and education institutions. How does that translate to educating the future workforce on the ground? Do you explain these to the young people and even the current workforce that you may want to consider changing to this path so that a young adult, 30 years of age, can go back and take a class perhaps?
So we try to see how we can translate it at the Polytechnic level. So for example, at Nanyang Polytechnic, AI is a core program in every diploma.
Every diploma?
Every diploma has an AI component.
Even in the health sector?
Yes. But on top of that, there are also AI specializations as well. In some of the disciplines and some of the diplomas, there is specific AI specialization to actually go deeper into it rather than just prompt engineering alone. So it goes beyond that. And as a Polytechnic, what we try to do is also try to involve them in projects in industry, as what Yu Chong mentioned, to actually get real-life examples and projects into industry where we get our students and our staff to actually co-work with the industry so that they can have a real-life example of how it's actually applied. Then the students can learn better this way rather than just reading about it.
I heard some very interesting stories in the nursing school, for example, where with AI, they can leave a lot of that, the data entry and let the computers sort that out so that the nurse and the medical professionals can spend more time with the patient and do what they were really prepared to do. Alexander, I want to bring you in because you actually work with the workers and the unions. There is an open, it's not a state secret that, when you can't get the workforce to fit certain types of jobs because they just don't want to be out in the sun and to do all this stuff, foreign workforce has to come in. But that's a very delicate balance in the Singapore context. And in the earlier panel discussion, even a challenge in Germany with immigration and migration. Your thoughts on that? How do you have solutions or strategies for that?
Yeah, I really don't. But I think what I tell my employees and what we also discuss in the Employer Federation is that AI is nothing new. It is basically just a turbo on digitization and automation. So it's just accelerating the speed of which we can use computer power in our jobs. And the narrative has interestingly changed so much in the last year, where up until maybe even 6 months ago, work from home was a major desire of new, people who want to look for a job, right? And I tell now people, basically any job that you can do from home can actually be automated and replaced by AI very soon. Because the fact that that job is mobile and not location-based already makes it very likely that it can be replaced very fast. So I tell people, don't try to find that job where you can do everything from home because that's the easiest to be replaced.
There's already a warning sign out.
Find a job where you need to be on a certain location because that's less likely to be. And just by the way, of all the jobs in Singapore, 1/3 are still location-based. But it's only 1/3. So for Singapore, of course, you have two areas where of difficulty. One is the jobs that Singaporeans don't want to do. So these ones you can then complement with lower wage foreign workforce. And then you have the other area where we just don't have the necessary skills. And then you can also complement them with foreign workforce and bring them in because the numbers in Singapore are not so big. So actually for Singapore, the access, because relatively numbers are small, is a beautiful buffer that they have. And if you have a crisis of recession, you can also, through quota topics, reduce the dependency on workforce and therefore buffer the impact for the Singaporean population, which is something that we do, I think, very, very well and very smartly here in Singapore. So not afraid of AI. I think the industries need to look at what digitization, automation means to them. And I think the government really drives there what we call these industry transformation maps. So you have government initiatives where they really target certain industry and try to identify how will a certain industry transform, and how do we then work with the education institutes of all levels, from higher to lower to middle, the employees and the industry associations, to anticipate that change and to actually drive the transformation to become proactive and not reactive. And in the key industries for Singapore, they're already very far on these industry transformation maps. And then they will identify how will jobs change and how can we make sure that we have a relevant skilled workforce.
All right.
Yeah.
I want to bring Thomas into the conversation to just wrap up this section on future-oriented strategies. Even now, as we speak, I'm receiving reports on the top 10 skills for 2026 that you need, the top 10 skills. I mean, every other think tank out there will come out with a report. It's a traditional thing as the new year comes upon us. And Thomas, in your preliminary comments that you shared with me, you said that there's also a need for the teachers themselves to train themselves and to be ready for the new work and the disruption which is happening. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks very much. That's a very important topic, and we basically we have to demand from our teachers to engage in lifelong learning as everybody else, and teachers are incredibly important in the entire TVET system. And just imagine, I'm telling my students, once they enter the labor market, which will maybe in 3 or 4 years, they will have to work another 45 years. So we are talking about, what, 2070?
Yeah.
And then they will educate young people who will work until, what, 2120?
I won't be around.
Yeah, me too. I won't be around, but we need to be aware of this, and we can't possibly foresee. I mean, we can make an effort, but how far can we really look into the future, and what can we really anticipate? So basically, the formal educational system has to reconsider its role. Or it has to be a lot more. I know that you are championing this way to teach and to learn, or organizing learning, and it has to be a lot more than only an institution or mindset where you just disseminate knowledge.
But how do you do that?
That's not enough.
Sorry to interrupt, but how do you do that in Germany to get teachers and trainers who say, "Look, I'm an expert. I did my teacher training. I don't need to go back to school."
Yeah, well, first of all, what I would expect from teachers is that they monitor the labor market, the part of the labor market at least they are in charge for, and that they decide in bottom-up processes what their own work has to change, or how their own work has to change. They don't have to do this on their own. They can do it in a team, and then of course, if they get support, like specific programs in AI or in whatever, AI is here in order to stay. And it's true. It's with regard to automatization, it has been here for quite a while, but now it's public awareness. So it's basically the outreach of AI is tremendous, and many things will change. And we don't even know where teaching will happen in the future, or where learning will be organized in the future. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a formal institution. There are some organizations who assume that formal educational organizations might disappear. They will disappear if they don't redefine their role. So knowledge dissemination is not enough. It's about teamwork. It's about creativity. It's about anticipation of work processes. It's about laying a basis for lifelong learning. So this at least needs to be included, based on, let's say, the simulation of work task. That would be the pathway.
And you have sparked 2 questions in my head that I'm going to bring up. It's interesting that right now young people are actually going online and learning on YouTube. And they sit through, I mean, these are legitimate universities and polytechnics conducting a class on whatever topic you want. And then they walk into the classroom and catch the teacher. And the teacher said, "Okay, where did you get that?" You know. And so that's why I brought up teacher education. So thanks, Thomas, for bringing that up.
Question to Thomas on that.
Yeah.
isn't also one of the strengths of vocational training that you don't need necessarily academically trained teachers, right? Because we have practitioners from the respective profession who we can draw into the teaching organization to teach these skills that you want to get conveyed, right? So it's not like a school teacher where you have a primary teacher, secondary class teacher who are academically trained, and to retrain them is such a big effort, generational effort almost.
And time.
That you can draw on much wider resources when it comes to vocational training, talking vocational training, TVET.
Absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree. But that's not always the case.
Okay.
I mean, there are many teachers working in the TVET system who don't have a practical background. You know, a vocational school, sometimes they do their A-levels and then they want to become a teacher, and then they become a vocational teacher and have very little practical experience. That's different, of course, in an intercompany training center where they explicitly have a practical background, and where the objective primarily is skills development and excellence of work. So the combination is we have a vocational school, and here we get the theoretical background, and and of course we can develop more if we work like you do at Nanyang Polytechnic, in action-oriented, work-task-based manner, and that's what they should do. And normally they do this. We have everything in hand. We have standards who are saying, please educate our young people like this. So it's self-reliant learning as a basis, work task based as a basis for ongoing lifelong learning. So learn how to learn, basically.
Yeah. No, I mean, you raised a very important point, standards, and we have opened the Pandora's box. It's clear, I mean, it's not a secret again that a lot of teachers just went through the academic route, academically very sound, but no industry practice. When was the last time you pulled apart an electric car and put it back together again? I mean, let's talk real EV adoption. So how are you managing
I just
that?
wanted to add, I think for that part, in Nanyang Polytechnic, the lecturers that we actually bring in are actually experienced lecturers. We seldom take in somebody fresh from university and so on. We want them to have practical experience. But it's also important that throughout their time with us, they continue to remain current and relevant. So some of the ways in which we do would be actually to also send our teachers for attachments. So they need to be attached to industry as well, so that they understand what's happening in industry and they can come back and translate it as well. And
Excellent.
Besides formal training programs, attachments are important, and they also do industry projects as well. And that allows us to actually, it's compulsory for our lecturers to actually undertake one of these three, or if not all three. But I want to also mention that I think in training an individual, the responsibility doesn't lie with only institutions like us. We actually work a lot with companies, and this is where workplace training comes in. Workplace learning is a critical component, and we want to help the companies to have a sound system and impart the skills through their own trainers.
Okay, just hang on, Yuxian. Quick check with the audience. Any last chance to take a question in? Otherwise, we are doing very well. All right, let's push on. So yeah, Yu Cheong, go ahead.
Yeah, so in addition to what Jack Min mentioned about industry attachment, industry projects, so I mentioned about co-location labs, where the industry locates their equipment and the technologies within the SP, and that's where our lecturers also get a sort of experience of using the latest technologies within the industry. And I think another aspect that we implemented is what we call the solution-minded internship, where the students, when they go for the internship, they are supposed to look at company-based projects, either for productivity improvement or process improvement, product improvement. And that is where our supervisors from SP will have to sort of mentor the students in solving some of these problems. And from that experience, they also get a hang of what the concerns and the issues the companies are dealing with. So I think through the process, they get to understand the needs of the industry also a little bit more.
Right, I'm glad. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me say one thing.
Sure.
You cannot really compare the way teachers are educated here. This is very similar to our Fachhochschulprinzip. And I remember that Nanyang Polytechnic kind of looked into this, what Fachhochschule. Vocational education in Germany, the system itself is, as I said, at the very beginning. It's more than the dual system. So if you have, let's say, 100 teachers in your vocational school, then there are maybe 20 who have an industry background, and you take them and put them into the classes where the dual system is happening, and because that helps to increase quality. But there are other programs which are preparatory courses before finding an apprenticeship place. There are other programs which then where people go who underwent a dual system and get their A levels, and you want to prepare them for university, and then you need teachers which are qualified. Differently. So it's basically very heterogeneous kind of.
Yeah, we're not ruling that out. Stay, Thomas, because the next question is for you because you designed it. There is a need for a clear, understandable job profile. Tell us, why is that so important for you?
Yeah, well,
and we are now into the 2026 to 2030 segment. We are in the home stretch, gentlemen.
A clear job profile as a basis for developing programs which then last 3 years is necessary for the entire society and companies to understand what kind of quality I achieve. Basically, what the chambers in Germany, the chambers are, according by law, in charge for certifying then the final result and conducting the assessment. So if someone is trying to find a job somewhere else and is applying for the position in a company, and the company sees the certificates, the company can rely on the fact that they understand what's behind it. The same applies to the society. When I need a plumber, and then I look into the yellow pages or however, but then someone claims he is a plumber or she is a plumber, then I know, I have an idea what's behind that. So that's why I think clear job profiles or occupational profiles are really helpful.
Yeah, certifications and standards. I mean, I wouldn't trust anyone else to fix the wiring in my apartment, and then it just fails. Gentlemen, hard call, hard wall, 4 minutes. I'm going to be tough on you all. A minute each, so we won't have time to cover all the questions that we did plan, but this is the final stretch. Your recommendations. We'll start with Thomas, and we'll just go down the line. What needs to happen moving forward? It could be a Germany-Singapore collaboration. This is, after all, the Grow Talks series. What would you like to put on the table? But I'm going to be cheeky. I'm actually reading literature out there that in the not too distant future, there may not be a T in the TVET. It's like the technical, vocational, educational training is like, everything. And like you said, everything is going to be AI, even in the health sector and sustainability areas. But less of me talking. Let's start with you, Thomas. What is your key recommendation 2026 forward?
Well, I believe that it's important to strengthen the workplace, the in-company workplace, and as a learning venue, I think it has a lot more to offer. And there will be future perspectives, and there are already many solutions around. So basically, cooperation in that sense would mean for me that we exchange knowledge stock and understand what can be maybe taken from other places to Germany or back. So somehow this needs to be organized.
Very good. And I wrote this down. Strengthen the company and the actual workplace, because that's where a lot of our workers, our young graduates, are spending so much of their time.
Yeah, and it's not only for initial vocational education, lifelong learning. That's where lifelong learning will be happening. We had a situation 20 years ago when people were sent to attend from, let's say, a large IT company, a 2 weeks program, and then they are missing at the workplace, cannot be productive. So that's the cost factor for companies. And then they come back and they can only employ 5% of what they've learned.
Exactly. Okay. We hear you. Alexander?
So for Singapore, I think one of the most important things is that we strengthen our HR community. We need to move HR from an administrative role to a performance-driven, transformative best practices role. It's absolutely critical for companies, big or small. We have started the process by accrediting HR professionals here in Singapore through what is called the Institute for HR Professionals. But it's just the beginning, because only if HR is at the strategic company table will that topic be holistically addressed. And we have a long way to go, but we are on that way. But that's for companies very, very important, so that universities also have a counterpart.
Good to know, and as an excellent point. Thanks for sharing that, Alexander.
Yeah, so I don't think the word technical will disappear because there are still a lot of jobs that requires hands skills. For example, maintaining infrastructure. When
I'm smiling, but thanks for staying firm. So I think there are a lot of people out there who will be happy.
Definitely. I mean, when the rail breaks down, you need an engineer who goes down to the field to troubleshoot. So I don't think the word technical will disappear. But I'm thinking that because we do not know what are the new technologies that are on the horizon. And so I think some of the panel members mentioned about this ability to learn how to learn. It is very, very important because then they can adapt and be brave to venture into new areas and to learn and pick up the necessary skills to do the future job. So I think that portion is very critical for educationalists like us to instill this awareness of how to learn into our students. I think that's very critical.
I think you got the nice title for the next Polytechnic public service message: ability to learn how to learn. Nicely said. Jake Min, you have the final word.
I think the last part, the most important part, I feel would be the workplace learning part. That is the most critical component that's still not comparable to others like public providers training or private providers training. If we can actually have a very strong pillar in that workplace component, and that's why we are pushing so hard for it, for workplace learning, providing all sorts of incentives. And here, I think we need not do alone. Collaboration is the key. Collaboration with industry, collaboration with unions, and collaboration with other overseas partners. We have strong collaboration with Germany, Switzerland, and Japan, and so on. And this is where I think the exchange of ideas will allow us to propel ourselves forward to make sure that we can learn from the best. Thank you.
If I may be permitted to quote the slogan of my favorite football club, you will never walk alone. So collaboration, and you can guess what that is. Collaboration is key to moving forward and identifying new ways of success. And that's all the time we have for this panel discussion. Please join me in thanking our panel for their enlightening responses. Professor Dr. Thomas Schroeder, Alexander Melchers, Loh Yew Cheong, and Tan Jek Min. And thanks to all of you for your participation throughout the entire series. And on that note, we bring this special Grow Talk series to a close. 16 speakers, 4 topics, all discussions will be made available online for your review. Please do share the links with your friends, both in Germany and Singapore, and of course beyond. Till next time, I'm Augustine Athwan. Thanks so much for being with us in the Grow Talk series.